Now, the very observant amongst you will realise that I'm not Jill Bennett. I'm afraid Jill has tested positive for COVID, so she's not able to be here this evening. So the marvellous role of hosting and chairing this event has fallen to me. So first of all, I've just got a couple of housekeeping things to say. First of all, if you do need a loo, it's out the back of church. Just turn left and past the kitchen where you got your drinks. There's toilets down there. In the event of a fire, exits are there, and there. And the muster point is on the front of church. Life jackets are under your seats. Oxygen masks will fall. Yes, exactly. So, first things first, this is being live streamed, so if you're not wanting to appear on camera, as a result of that, please don't film yourself as well what's going on this evening. That's primarily for causes of safeguarding the event yourself. It will appear on screen afterwards. Everybody, all the candidates had been invited to attend this evening. The Heritage candidate was unable to attend and has sent his apologies, and the Conservative candidate, who we all know is Liz Truss, is unable to be here this evening due to a prior arrangement in another local village. As a thoroughly independent person, I have no comment to say. So we're going to try and ask as many questions as we can. We need to give each candidate a fair hearing. The questions are all grouped into specific topics. So I'm going to give an overview, really, of each topic. Candidates will have 2 minutes to answer each question. So as you see, with 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 candidates, that's going to take some time for each question that's asked. If your question isn't asked, or there's an area of interest that we just don't have the time to cover this evening, please do feel free to write to the candidates, because I'm sure each one of them would be really happy to hear from you and reply accordingly. And I think that's all of my introductions to make. We have all the candidates with us. We will begin with our first topic, which is the NHS. The name that was drawn out of the hat, out of the back, to answer questions first was our independent candidate, James Bagg. And once James has finished his 2 minutes, it will move down the line and back. And the second question, we'll start with Terry and then move further down. Okay? Is that clear as mud? Yes. Excellent. So there are an awful lot of questions about the NHS in terms of mental health provision, in terms of dentistry provision, particularly here in our corner of southwest Norfolk. And the question really, to fund it and the importance of it all. So what are your policies on funding the NHS, with particular reference to mental health and to dentistry? Okay, James, over to you.
Am I live? Thank you, Paul. Can everyone hear me? I think it is live, yes. Clearly, the NHS is in a poor state. The hospital in King's Lynn is being propped up and in need of a new hospital. And secondly, access to primary care is very challenged, both here and right across this constituency. There is and has been a reform, an introduction of a new integrated care system within the county, and that is in the process of being rolled out. The question is, although all the literature reads extremely well, as with all these things, it's a question of how it can be implemented. And I am told, and I've had discussions with Patricia Hewitt, who's the chair, that it is happening. Frankly, I'm a bit troubled that there is a crossover, a rather poor crossover between the council provision for health and well-being boards and the place boards the NHS run. And I'm told that it's running well in South Norfolk, where there isn't a full overlap of those two services. I was going to have a meeting there to see how it is being operated. We do need coherent, cohesive and collaborative arrangement between councils who are responsible for care and the NHS who run these services. So there's a lot, I think, that can be done on the ground in addition to requiring extra funding. When it comes to extra funding, I do think that we need to look at a much more long-term strategic plan for the NHS. We need to look at the possibility of some form of insurance for health. And I recognise this may not be palatable to everybody, but somehow, and I see someone whirring in front of me, we need a strategic plan to correct this imbalance in the provision of our healthcare.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. The NHS is my number one campaign priority for a reason, because it doesn't matter if we're talking about adult social care, GP services or dentistry. Everywhere you look at the moment, the system is broken after 14 years of Conservative government. Particularly on social care, at this moment in time, Norfolk County Council is working with 450 different providers of social care in Norfolk. That is expensive. There are 450 different managers, 450 different payroll providers, and 450 different quality assurance checks. A third of those companies in Norfolk are rated as failing, but the County Council continues to use them. We've got to reform adult social care to reduce the bottleneck, to get people out of the hospital wards, back into their own homes, back into care, to unlock that challenge. Very similar with dentistry. The Eastern region is the only region in the UK that doesn't have a dentistry school. We've got to make that a priority, and there are early discussions about dentistry school at the UEA. Linked to that, a commitment as part of NHS contracts that they support areas that are underserved. Norfolk is in the top 5% worst access to dentistry in the country, and we've got to address that. There's more children going to hospital now, aged between 5 and 10, with rotting teeth than any other issue, and that is outrageous. There's also got to be reform of the NHS dentistry contract as well. Lastly, on mental health, the Norfolk and Suffolk Mental Health Trust has been failing repeatedly despite the efforts of staff. I'm very clear that I support that service being broken up into a Norfolk-only mental health trust with the right resources. The failings of the Mental Health Trust are putting pressure on all other aspects of the NHS service, and that's why we're seeing constant delays, constant challenges, and there are some key interventions that don't necessarily have to cost a fortune, but we've got to mix it with additional money, but also reform.
Thank you.
Thank you. I can understand why dentistry has come up as a high priority question, because so many of us are struggling just to get regular appointments, and it's disgraceful that even children can't be registered with a dentist anywhere in Norfolk. Parents are having to go out of town, out of the county even, to access dentist services for their children. The Liberal Democrats want to reform the dentistry contract, which is at the root of the problem and has been for a long time, so that the service is back to where it used to be, really. In the short term, we need to get a lot of provision in place so that everyone can catch up with your appointments. And also, of course, we need our workforce back. We have lost some of our skilled dentistry people through Brexit, and they've gone to, back to other countries, but the training, these are skilled people that we've lost. So we do need to encourage them to come back with a good system to support them. On mental health, we want to put mental health on the same footing as physical health for treatment and prevention. I'm sure many of you will remember Norman Lamb MP was the Liberal Democrat MP in North Norfolk, and he worked very hard during the coalition to put mental health on the same footing, but unfortunately that has all gone by the wayside in more recent years. So we've been trying to campaign on that for a long time, or to get that better. To pay for this, we want to reform capital gains tax, and also taxes on, some of the big, I can't remember. Sorry, yes, capital gains tax and some others to fund the NHS, and cut the Conservatives' tax on banks to help pay for care. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Hi there. Well, I've actually worked as a nursing assistant for the NHS. It was down in Portsmouth, but I've also worked up here in Helston Hospital. And the hospital I used to work at in Portsmouth is no longer there. It's gone. So all those patients, where have they gone? There was a lack of care in the community down there, and there's a lack of care in the community up here right now. So reform is basically looking at smarter ways of spending the money. Rather than sort of spending the money all on the middle management, we need to support spending on actual frontline staff. That's the focus for Reform UK. So with that, there'll be frontline staff will get 0% tax rate for the first 3 years, just to draw people in, keep them into the service. And that's one of the main things that we want to do. We want to sort of focus on the spending and be much smarter about it and where it goes. Also, lastly, just to say, mass immigration is causing a huge issue.
As you may realise, my answers were very quick, so I won't waste too much time tonight. But nothing to do with mental health or dentistry, but doctors' waiting lists. It's quite simple. Your local doctors, you find the patients all with the same ailments, together, and meet the doctor en masse, so it cuts down on appointments.
That might work. Just a couple of points in response to some of the points that have been made. Firstly, without immigration, the NHS would collapse completely. Secondly, we do have an insurance system in place for health. It's called national insurance, which Rishi Sunak wants to abolish. And it also pays for our pensions as well. So let's not forget that abolishing national insurance might well be the end of the old age pension. And a triple lock of nothing is worth nothing. Privatisation is the principal problem, I think, in the NHS at the moment. We've seen huge amounts of money being handed over to the private sector, and every penny of private profit paid by the NHS, as far as I'm concerned, is money stolen from patient care. The situation with dentistry in Norfolk is almost the worst in the country, if not the worst in the country. It's unconscionable that the maximum, or the majority of operations being carried out on children now is to remove rotten teeth. What an indictment in 21st century Britain, really unacceptable. As far as I'm concerned, there is more than enough money in this country, more than enough money being generated to cover all of the costs of the NHS. The trouble is it's in the wrong place. It's in the Cayman Islands, it's sitting in Jersey, it's sitting in tax havens all over the world. British tax havens, time to shut them down and time to actually recover some of that money to deliver the services that we need. We have a staffing crisis, and the way to solve that staffing crisis, I would argue, is firstly a fair pay increase for NHS staff. Secondly, abolish tuition fees for doctors and nurses. It's insane to expect them to build £70,000 of debt. Write off the student debt of the doctors. That will go a long way towards sorting the current problem out. And end the internal market. Do away with bureaucracy. Give the clinicians
Thank you very much.
the power.
Can I just take this opportunity to say how wonderful it is to see such a vast crowd here. It's just great to see all of you. Thank you all for turning up on a hot summer's evening. It gives me so much hope because it shows that everyone's engaged and interested, and are interested in policy. which is what politics should be about. The Green Party is very clear on our stance towards the NHS. We believe in a publicly funded health service that works for everyone. We make no bones about it and no apologies about it. We know that the public are also on side with this. The British public understand that a publicly funded health service is the most economic, the most efficient, and the best way to deliver health care to all of us. It has worked previously and it will work again. The reason it's as appalling as it is today is because of 14 years of systematic underfunding in the NHS. I just want to pick up on a couple of specific points. Mental health. The number of mental health beds in this country has shrunk year after year after year under successive governments, both Labour and Conservative. It's a disgrace. We need to do so much better in looking after our patients who have mental health problems. We'd be foolish to ignore it. The cost, the economic cost alone of the mental health burden in this country is enormous. And it's foolish not to invest in our health. A healthy population is also an economically productive one. And I say this to people who only understand the numbers, as if health in itself isn't worthy of, aiming for. Coming to dentistry, I keep hearing people say about opening a dental school in East Anglia. That's simply not going to solve the problem. The problem lies with the dental contract. The national dental contract, the NHS dental contract, is rubbish. It needs to be
sorry, that's time, so sorry.
Okay, thank you. I've got lots to say.
Ladies and gentlemen, I realised I was very remiss at the beginning that I didn't allow the candidates to introduce themselves. So, in a very, very quick blind date kind of a style, what's your name and where you're from?
And I'm silent. I'm Lorraine Douglas, I'm from the Communist Party.
I'm Pallavi Devalapalli, a Green Party and a GP in Downham Market.
I'm James Bagg, and I'm standing as an independent councillor. Candidate.
Yeah, good evening, my name's Terry Jermyn, I'm the Labour candidate.
Hello, I'm Josie Ratcliffe. Many of you will know me as a local councillor in Downham Market.
Hello, I'm Toby Mackenzie. I'm Reform UK candidate.
Earl Elvis, Mozzarella Ludi Party from Outwell.
Okay, we've some questions on defence spending. I'm going to do the first few because I think we can do these as yes or no's from our candidates, and then a bit of a deeper dive into a question about defence spending. So, yes or no, we'll start, Lorraine, with you and come down this way just for quick ones. Will your party commit to more military support for Ukraine?
No.
Okay. Keep coming down.
Yes.
Certainly, yes.
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 Okay, so again, yes or no, do you support an immediate and unconditional ceasefire in Gaza?
Yes.
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 No comment.
Linked in with that one, do you support an immediate end to arms sales to Israel?
Yes.
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 I'm not going to give you a yes or no answer to that one, I'm afraid. There's a really important process taking place to assess the situation in terms of whether genocide has been committed, and I think it's important that that process takes place. If indeed that fair process does find that genocide has taken place, then absolutely there should be a ban on sales.
Okay, thank you.
yes, similarly, the Liberal Democrats are supporting the International
Yes
Criminal
or no?
Court ruling.
As well, please.
That's-
Are you similar to Labour?
I don't know what the International Criminal Court ruling is on
Sure.
the Arms 2, so I can't see either way, but we will support that ruling, and if that includes stopping arms sales, then yes,
Okay.
of course.
Thank you.
I can't give a yes or no. I think you need to wait and see, to be honest with you. That's my
That's
honest
fine.
answer.
Yep.
Thought it was a yes or no question. No comment.
Okay, some of those questions actually really did require more of a nuanced answer, didn't they? Which may come up in this next question about views on defence spending. So we'll start here with you, if that's all right. What are your views on defence spending?
I think the Labour Party is committed to our NATO obligations, which is a minimum of 2.5% on defence spending. I think it's right and proper that we are suitably staffed and armed. I think the way the government has treated our armed services over the past few years has been appalling. I work with many military families in my role as a councillor in Thetford, and it is shocking to see that our military personnel are resorted to food banks and struggling with accommodation that has mould and other sort of unsatisfactory conditions. We absolutely should be supporting the people that ultimately secure and defend our freedoms, and the Labour Party is committed to doing that.
Thank you. Yes, the defence industry is a very important industry in the UK. The Liberal Democrats are committed to supporting that. We want to build back the numbers in the army to their previous figures of 100,000 serving personnel in particular. Now, we'll find out what our position is on the Air Force, given our proximity to RAF Marham. We also want, for the Navy, we want 4 nuclear submarines to be active at the time. Given the global situation, we want 4 functioning nuclear submarines to be available for a deterrent. And we do want a fair deal for serving personnel and for veterans as well, in housing and pensions and access to benefits and healthcare. So yes, we very much support our armed forces community. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, Reform wants to recruit more than 30,000 soldiers to its armed forces. We want to increase spending 2.5%, but then 3% over a period of 3 years. We want an increase in pay as well, which is good because my son wants to join the army. And we want a comprehensive review of the veterans, and we want to make sure that they are looked after properly, because they're not, and there are far too many of them living on the streets, which is horrific. Also want to review the defence purchases and exactly how they're being spent, because there's lots of examples of misspending. So we want to, again, spend the money far smarter than we have been.
I think we should capitalise on the headquarters of Britain's finest ever army from Thetford. Forget Conservative plans for national service and concentrate recruitment of those aged over 50 who have in life more intelligence and experience.
And isn't it the case that if it was the old men who actually had to go to war, we wouldn't have any wars anymore? My party supports the withdrawal of Britain from NATO. We support the establishment of an independent foreign policy, one that isn't based upon squandering billions and billions on weapons of mass destruction, which can never be used without the risk of mutually assured destruction. I can't see any justification for spending £200 billion in total on renewing Trident when we're seeing our armed forces actually being hollowed out, and when we have no insufficient conventional forces to actually provide not just a proper defence in the event of Britain being under threat, but also being able to provide the sort of civil defence that we're increasingly seeing the need of as a result of climate emergency. I stand for peace. I stand for an end to the war in Ukraine, a negotiated end with a fair settlement for Ukraine and a respect for Ukraine's national borders. But let's just be clear about this. It was 30 years of poking the bear that led to Russia invading Ukraine in the first place. That's the reality. That doesn't justify the invasion and it doesn't justify the war or the slaughter, but let's just be clear about this. NATO will continue to prosecute that war to the last drop of Ukrainian blood, and I think it is shameful, shameful that so many young men are being slaughtered on a daily basis. For what at the end of the day? That war needs to end. The war in Gaza needs to end. Britain needs to stop arming Israel. The United States needs to stop arming Israel. We need to stop the genocide. If we wait for the decision of the International Criminal Court on genocide, when we can see it happening before our eyes on a daily basis, then we are going to have no Palestinians left in Gaza. Everyone will be dead.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. The Green Party is a party of peace, primarily, but obviously we live in the real world and we don't live in a peaceful world. Unfortunately, the status quo is that there are wars in too many places and we are threatened in many ways. Coming to defence spending, I've actually visited RAF Marham in my councillor role, and it pained me to see how poor the accommodation is for new recruits. I think it's shameful that this is how we treat our armed forces personnel. At the end of the day, whether you are a big fan of military or not, the fact is we're here today talking peacefully, able to exercise our right to democracy because our armed forces keep us safe. We owe them a huge debt, and I think it's disgraceful that the government treats them the way it does. So I would fully support spending on our armed forces to give them a decent standard of living and to actually make them feel cared for. But the other thing I want to say is, and the same goes for our veterans, by the way, I see our veterans and honestly, it's appalling the way they're left once they leave. The big problems facing us in terms of security are things like cyber terrorism and terrorism on the streets through fundamentalism and things like that. You know, we don't need Trident because that's useless in this day and age. What we need is a really sharp focus on the cyber threats. You know, one hacker sitting somewhere in Russia or whichever country, you know, pick your country, but somebody somewhere could just sit and pull the plug and it could paralyze our society. It's totally frightening, and yet nobody seems to give any thought to that. It's ridiculous. On top of that, we have all the soft wars going on, the way people are trying to brainwash our youngsters, TikTok videos, misleading algorithms, taking them down the path of, you know, mental health problems. These are the things we need to focus on, and that's what I will push for if elected.
Okay, thank you very much.
We are living in a very dangerous world. Ukraine deserves all the support that we can give them. We cannot condone invasion of territory belonging to others, by whomever that may be. So they must be supported. As an ex-soldier having served in Northern Ireland and in Cyprus, of course I support the defence industry and all that we need for our own defences here in this country. We need to commit to the 2.5% growing to 3%. It's wrong that over the last 14 years they've cut back so radically on those forces who are here to defend us, leaving us exposed as we speak and stand now. We need to sharpen the procurement process within the armed forces. There's too much bureaucracy. We need to, as others have said, look after the soldiers themselves. Their families, their wives need to be looked after. And above all, too, we must be sure that the Armed Forces Covenant is strongly adhered to, so that all those who have suffered as a result of conflict in our midst are properly looked after and cared for. And I'm thinking particularly of those soldiers who have been suffering from PTSD and who are suffering from mental illness as a result. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, so moving on to our next topic, a couple of questions on equality and inclusion that kind of come from different angles. So we'll try and do them both at the same time. So firstly, this issue that there's been an enormous increase in hate crime against the LGBTQ+ community. How will you help them feel safe within society? And then kind of allied to that as well, there's a lot of discussion too about rights of women and women-only spaces. So again, your thoughts and the thoughts of your party on those two issues, please. Thank you, Josie.
Thank you. The Liberal Democrats believe that everyone has a right to live with safety and dignity. On the subject of gender choices, most people are comfortable with the gender they're born with, but about maybe 1% of the population are not. But for a long time, or all through history, those people have, not caused any problems to other people. They've just lived their lives. It's a very recent phenomenon. The culture wars have started, and they've become the latest target for othering them, for trying to divide the community and placing blame for problems which are caused primarily by our government of the last few years, and trying to blame minorities of whichever type. So we want to make sure that workplaces are, and workplace law is inclusive of everyone. When Conservatives talk about cutting red tape, what they actually mean is cutting, for example, employment rights or health and safety rules, things that give us safeguarding. We don't want, red tape is good when it protects people and it protects individuals. We also want to make the workplaces better for people with disabilities as well. People give people the right to work, or better support to work from home if they can. That's a much better environment for many people. So we do have a lot of policies. We have a very strong LGBTQ+ organisation within the Liberal Democrats who guide our policies. Thank you.
Thank you.
Nobody should suffer any misjudgment or abuse or hate or anything depending on the sexuality. That's entirely wrong, and Reform completely backs that up, and I certainly do. I work in education for Norfolk County actually, so I'm very aware of all these issues and fully compliant with them, fully agree with them. What we'd like to do though is look at the hate speech, and just to make sure that is clarified, because I think that's open to a lot of interpretation. So those are the two main points that I can say.
Thank you.
I think we should go back to the swinging 60s where peace was everywhere and love on earth. More police on the beat and red tape to be renamed yellow tape for things that you can do.
We say that everyone should be able to live the life that they choose and to love who they please. And that includes the right to dress as you please, to adopt pronouns as you choose, to enter into consensual human relationships, and as adults to undergo cosmetic and medical procedures and to have access to the medical support and mental health support that you need. Everyone has the right to live free from discrimination and harassment and to be protected from insulting behaviour and threats of violence. So far as women are concerned, I think it's worth noting that of all the hates out there, misogyny is not defined as a hate crime, and I think it's long past the time that it was. Women's sex-based rights are under attack, and they're under attack as a result of austerity. They're under attack as a result of the policies that have been pursued by this government over the last 14 years. And those rights include the mass closure of rape crisis centres, the closure of women's refuges, the loss of maternity rights for women who are on 0 hours contracts and working casual hours, and so on and so forth. So I think there is an awful lot of work to be done to resolve the situation. We do need single-sex spaces. We should be entitled to single-sex spaces. We shouldn't have to argue for the right to be seen by a woman if we're undergoing intimate treatment from doctors and nurses. I don't think that's unreasonable. I wouldn't expect men to be required to be seen by a woman if they would prefer to be seen by a man. I don't see why women shouldn't have exactly the same rights.
Thank you.
I've yet to meet anyone who actually says that somebody shouldn't have the right to be addressed as they please, to dress as they please. And I really think there's something mischievous in the air to make this out to be an issue, when really I've really yet to meet anyone. I meet a lot of people every single week. Everybody's happy for people around them to live as they please. Rights based on how you choose to dress or call yourself shouldn't even be a thing, and I don't think they are. The confusion arises when people start conflating sex with gender. Sex-based rights are important. We need to maintain that distinction, and I speak here as a GP. Biology is a real thing. It's not a belief to say that, female sex is different to the male sex. And there's nothing wrong in accepting that, of course, there are some people who fall between the two, but they are very, very few and far between. There has been something strange in the air about the way we've seen a mushrooming of people wanting to change gender. And the CAST review has actually shone such beautiful light on it. And I felt proud to be British when that report came out. Because what Dr. Cass did was undergo a thorough study for 4 years to actually lay bare how toxic the atmosphere had become, to the extent that healthcare professionals had become terrorized into not being able to speak freely and give young people the care that they deserved, the holistic care that they deserved. So all their other needs, their mental health needs, their neurodivergent needs, all of them were being put to one side as soon as they expressed confusion around their gender. We need to respect what Dr. Cass has done and follow that review 100%. And as a society, let's move forward in a united way. I don't think common people have any problem with this. Let's just ignore the noise that's coming from elsewhere and use our common sense.
Thank you very much. Sorry, Shreya.
People should be able to live the life they wish to. I do believe in respect to common decency and courtesy. People must always be able to feel safe. I recognize there's some really difficult situations which are arising, particularly in hospitals and prisons, and I defer to Pallavi on the issues of sex and gender, of course. She knows a great deal more about it. I respect the right of people, as I say, to live as they wish. In hospitals, there needs to be clear guidance to help those people who are making those difficult decisions find safe spaces for people who are feeling uncomfortable. So let people live the life they lead, but at all times have respect for others and give space to others. Thank you.
Oh, sorry, I'm so sorry.
I thought you might forget me. The downside of going last is not only are you forgotten, but many of the points I wanted to make have been covered. But I do just want to make 3 quick points. Firstly, that I think it's really important that we recognise that homophobia, prejudice and transphobia still exist. And it's important that we debate that and we call that out when it happens. And in my experience, we might have hate crime legislation in this country, but it's like so many crimes, it's not nearly enforced enough. And there needs to be more training, particularly for the police and others in tackling hate crime in this country, because it's not dealt with as serious as it should be. The other important thing that I think we should call out is how there is a real need to have a debate about gender and about sex, but it is important that we do not use that as a political football. And I've seen over the last 6 months during this election campaign, the previous MP for South West Norfolk using these issues as a political football to score points, and I think that is outrageous. The last point I wanted to make is that when I talk to women and girls in southwest Norfolk, they are concerned about their health, they're concerned about their safety, but let's be realistic. They are concerned because they can't get a dentist appointment. They're concerned because when they phone for an ambulance, they do not come. It is important we have debates about same-sex spaces, but actually women and girls are under threat for a whole range of issues in this country, and it's important that we're proportionate in our discussions.
I've just got a moment of a right of reply because the candidate was mentioned by name in an answer given by another candidate.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to clarify that I'm not entirely sure what the reference was about disagreeing with me, but I want to clarify that I would fully support women having access to same-sex spaces in hospitals, prisons, and wherever else we're needed, refuges and so on. Just want to make that very clear.
Okay, thank you very much. This one's created a little bit of buzz in the room already by sheer mention of the word. So all parties talk about immigration. How will your party stop illegal immigration? Is a question that was asked. Illegal. Yeah.
As far as reform goes with the illegal immigration, we need to stop the boats as they're arriving. We need to pick people up safely and return them back to where they came from. That's what we need to do. And there is an act that we can follow to do that. So that's what will happen.
Those who have read the manifesto, I'll just read from there. Border force to go to France with 10-mile bungee leads to attach the boats. They get halfway across, and that's it.
I just think it's worth remembering that we're talking about human beings here who, in the main, are desperate and in despair. They're coming from countries in the main that have been destroyed, usually with British involvement. Afghanistan, Libya, Iraq, Syria, that's where the vast majority of these illegal immigrants are coming from at the moment. They're fleeing war, they're fleeing persecution, they're fleeing slavery. Slavery's come back to Libya as a result of us bombing the place to Kingdom Come. I feel very strongly that when we talk about human beings being illegal immigrants, when we've shut off every legal route for people to claim asylum, which they have an international right to do, they all have an international, everybody under international law, if you're fleeing persecution, you have the right to claim asylum anywhere you choose in the world, not just the first country you land in. That's the law, that's the international law, the law to which Winston Churchill signed up in the 1950s. That's how long that law has been here. So let's just stop talking about illegal immigrants. Let's start talking about human beings. Let's start taking responsibility for the refugee crisis, which we in the main have created. And let's actually start being decent for once. I don't have a problem with people seeking asylum in this country if they need to. It seems that the Tories don't have a problem if you're white and seeking asylum. And they don't have a problem if you're from Hong Kong seeking asylum and you've got lots of money. So as far as I'm concerned, let's be kind, let's be decent, let's open up legal routes, and let's actually give people their rights as written under international law.
I think this is a really important question, actually. As Anne said, the reason we have illegal immigration is because there are no legal routes to enter this country to seek asylum. Because this government and the government before it have actually removed all routes by which people can actually come and say, can I have refuge here? Seeking refuge goes back centuries. You know, people have always gone, you know, when they've been subjected to torture or when they're unable to live in the country of their origin, they have gone and sought refuge in neighboring kingdoms or wherever else. So it's nothing new, but the scale at which it's going to happen is going to be terrifying as climate change takes hold. We're going to see droughts. We're going to see droughts and famines. We're going to see wars break out for food and water in different parts of the world, and it's coming to us too. So actually, the sooner we open our eyes to this problem, the better it is for all of us. So the first thing I would support, and most recently in the news, I was horrified to read that the Greek coast guards apparently actually picked people off boats and threw them in the sea. This is the horror of the world that we are currently living in. And our leaders have no solutions. They have nothing to say, nothing at all to offer. Let's just look for a long-term plan. First of all, why are people coming here? Let's look at the reasons. Let's support them in the countries that they're fleeing from. Let's try and stop wars and, help them to actually improve their resilience to climate change so that the famines stop happening. We need a much more long-term approach. We need a wiser approach to this, and we need a cross-party political this shouldn't be a political issue, a party political issue. We need to look at this as a country. Thank you.
It is a massive problem, and it requires an international solution. There are vast numbers of people escaping civil war in Sudan, in the Yemen, and elsewhere across the globe. There are large numbers of people escaping areas of the world which are becoming less and less habitable. So we need to negotiate with our colleagues in Europe. Frankly, it was a pity, in my view, that we left the Schengen Agreement, because it did mean that we could return illegal immigrants back to France, which we can no longer do, and we've had to resort to what, on the face of it, appeared crazy schemes like the Rwanda plan. Frankly, I now, given the investment and the time that we've given to the Rwanda plan, I do hope it does discourage people, if it works. The Rwanda plan discourages people from getting in the small boats and discourages the gangs who are putting these people in boats and pushing them across the channel. So let's attack the criminal gangs that are conducting this illegal and horrible trade. Let's negotiate with our international friends to make sure that we can cope with this migration of population which is moving ever further north as a result, as I said, of wars and famine. So it's a massively difficult problem, and one which we do need to negotiate and work with our friends across the Channel and throughout Europe. Thank you.
The Rwanda plan, as you call it, is not a plan, it's a policy which is a disgrace. And I look forward to, if I'm successfully elected as a MP for South West Norfolk, I will take great delight in voting down the Rwanda plan. What we need to be doing, and the problem with the Rwanda plan is it focuses solely on the individuals in the boats. They are people who are fleeing some of the most horrible situations across the world, and they are being exploited. They are vulnerable individuals who are being exploited by criminal gangs who are preying on that vulnerability. I'm really pleased that the Labour Party's come up with a plan to tackle illegal immigration, and it's very much focused on new powers for organisations such as MO5 and MO6, but also rebuilding our border force that have been depleted over the last few years. We have got to take new laws and new resources to focus on the individuals who are exploiting vulnerable people. We've already spent on the Rwanda plan the money equivalent to 5.7 million GP appointments in this country. And we've not sent a single person there successfully. It was a gimmick from the start to support the Conservative Party, who were lagging in the opinion polls. It's not a sensible solution. We've got to focus on targeting those individuals who exploit others fleeing persecution.
Thank you. My personal belief is that we need to address this issue with compassion. These are human beings we're talking about. No one that arrives here from another country is an illegal immigrant until their situation has been assessed. For decades we've had an efficient system for doing that. People who are rightly fleeing a situation in their own country and are given right to remain here can work, pay taxes, settle, raise a family. those who don't have the right to remain did get removed. Again, the services have been so underfunded, and it's created an artificial problem which never, didn't previously exist. So we need to, first of all, have the setup. What the Liberal Democrats want to do is make sure that there are safe and legal routes for people to apply to move to the UK. Take the power out of the hands of the trafficking gangs and the huge amounts of money that goes through that. The Conservatives did promise in their 2019 manifesto to set up a new enforcement organisation for dealing with the migrants, but instead of, they haven't put that into place, they've just made it harder and harder and escalated the problem. Rightly, I understand it, we get told that a lot of people are economic migrants. They're coming from a relatively safe country, but they're attracted by the UK economy. Well, one of the ways we could tackle that is by reinstating the UK's overseas aid budget, which is actually a very small amount of the national budget, but would help other countries to become more stable and get their own economies on a firmer footing, so that people don't feel that they need to travel here to support their families.
Okay, sorry, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. A couple more quick-fire questions. Sorry, a couple more quick-fire questions. Earl Elvis, we'll start with you and come down this way, if that's all right. So, yes or no, does integrity, honesty and moral conduct matter anymore?
Apparently not. They should do.
Yes, integrity is vital.
Yes, integrity, honesty and commitment.
Yes, absolutely.
James?
Yes, and accountability to the constituency which you serve, and rather than to your own personal political ambitions.
I think the question answered itself. Yes, absolutely, of course they should, but are they? I think this election, hopefully, will give people who are not respecting these values the answer that they deserve.
Yes, and it's time to get rid of this venal, corrupt government as soon as possible.
And finally again, Earl Elvis, beginning with you, straight down the line again, will you personally hold surgeries in Downham and other villages to meet with your constituents if you are successfully elected?
I'd hold a surgery in every doctor's there are.
Yes, absolutely.
Yes, in Downham, Market, Thetford and Swaffham, so that people can only travel a reasonable distance.
Yes, an MP should be accessible. We've missed out on that for the last 14 years. I would like a presence in Downham Market permanently, not just on an ad hoc basis of a surgery. We need to be available to the public and accountable.
Certainly, and I will undertake to answer all issues which are raised with me, and I will research them and I will respond to everybody who raises issues with me, whether in the negative or in the positive.
Yes, absolutely. I will hold surgeries in all three major towns here. I will also respond to any online requests. I'll also try and attend and actually go about Southwest Norfolk if elected, because I actually love meeting people. I get so much enjoyment out of talking to people, and I think we get a lot more when we have informal chats as well. So I will definitely be out and around. You'll see a lot of me if I'm elected.
Yes, I too would be holding surgeries in the three main towns, and I would also seek to make myself available for people in rural areas as well. You would find me a champion for local people. I'm a great caseworker, and I will fight and advocate for people who are struggling against the vagaries of the state, if you like, people who are having difficulties with health, having difficulties with local government. That's what I do.
Thank you very much. Back to issues of policy, and I think we were up to Elvis to begin answering, and then we're back down to Lorraine. So there's a lot of questions here about cost of living and poverty and inequality in terms of financial situations as well. So issues of child poverty, issues of food bank use, and issues of energy as well, and the sheer cost of energy at the moment. So I know that's an awful lot over 2 minutes. Give it your best shots.
My only thing on climate change, energy, is nothing to do with the question, actually, really. To reinstate the 4 seasons that there used to be. Winter, snow, got nothing to do with the question. Spring, summer hot, and autumn mild.
It is a huge question, and there are some immediate things that could be done, like abolishing the 2-child cap on child benefit, which will lift hundreds of thousands of children out of poverty at a stroke. In terms of the overall cost of living, bring the energy companies, bring water, bring the railways, bring mail back into public ownership. Let's have proper price controls. Let's develop a sustainable food policy in this country so that people can actually afford to buy decent food and our farmers can afford to make a living from working the land, and stop the supermarkets from controlling and dictating the prices that are paid to farmers, and stop them fleecing us with their billions of pounds of profits. 3 of the big 3 supermarkets, I think, have made something like £5 billion profits between them in the last year, which in my view is unconscionable at a time when children are going to school hungry.
I think it's scandalous that we have such a cost of living crisis in the country, that so many people are having to resort to food banks in spite of working full-time jobs. And we're not talking about anyone, if we talk about nurses, we're talking about people doing what used to be, reasonably well-paid jobs. And this is purely down to government policy. I would support bringing down the cost of living by very similarly nationalising the 5 big energy companies. We'd put a windfall tax on the big oil and gas companies. We'd also put a windfall tax on banks who've actually profited enormously from the recent interest rates rise that the Bank of England has done. For absolutely no reason for them to be sitting on those profits. They belong to us, to the public. We'd work on climate change as well, so I would fully support small-scale industry, feed-in tariffs for solar panels, for example, so that people could actually benefit by being greener. Insulation for homes. One-off insulation to a home could make your home permanently warmer and reduce your bills permanently. Why are we not doing this on a war footing? This should be the first priority for any government. We have the most leaky homes in the continent of Europe. It's a disgrace. Nobody should have to live in cold homes. And this would generate jobs. That's the ironic thing. We could have so many green jobs created out of doing things like street-by-street home insulation, out of putting solar panels on roofs, small-scale wind generation, regenerating the soil, putting proper subsidies in for farmers so that they're actually encouraged to reduce their costs and go towards a more nature-friendly farming. These things are all so important. There's a clear roadmap, a clear way in which we can achieve all of this, and it would benefit ordinary people so much. And yet, it's sheer lack of political will and vision that's left us in this dire state.
Thank you.
Yes, it is shocking that so many people have to resort to food banks. Firstly, though, having worked Citizens Advice, I'm conscious that a lot of people don't get the benefits to which they are justifiably entitled. So I would encourage all those who are struggling with the cost of living to take advice and see whether they're getting those benefits to which they are entitled. Secondly, I would like to see us make this community more resilient as a community, working better together. We have a lot of incredible voluntary community groups working in our midst, better collaboration with councils and health authorities and educational trusts to support one another with collaborative funding. Too many times people are faced with problems and they're looking for support and they don't actually know where to go. We see this on a regular basis at with the Swan Youth Project and the Love Downham Project. We have people coming in and seeking advice and getting help from the wonderful staff that the Swan Youth Project offers and the Love Downham Project offers. So I would like to see us work together to make our community more resilient, to help those in need, and to make sure, as I say, that they're getting all those benefits to which they are entitled. Money does not grow on trees. We have to work better together, in my view, as I say, to make us a more resilient community, working better with councils, better with health authorities, all of whom have funds in pools of which they're very jealously guard, and they're very reluctant to share it with anybody else. So we must work together more as a community. That's what I would strive to encourage.
Thank you.
Like all of the candidates, I've been struck over the last few weeks by the sheer number of emails that we receive as candidates. One of them really jumped out at me, though, and that was a statistic from the Child Poverty Action Group. 1/3 of all children in South West Norfolk are living in poverty. That is disgraceful after 14 years of Conservative government, and that really concerns me. I see myself as a councillor, the number of food bank referrals that I complete, the number of fuel bank vouchers that are offered. It has been endless over the last few years, and that's one of the reasons I've decided to make the change from local government, where I've been a councillor for 15 years, but actually decided to stand for Parliament, because there's only so much we can do at a local level. We've got to have the MPs and the national government working to address these challenges as well. One of my campaign priorities is around jobs and pay. South West Norfolk is a real low-wage area. We've got to be increasing people's pay. More people use food banks in work than out of work. People that are in full-time work but can't afford to eat properly. So jobs and pay is crucial, because if you're on a low wage, that will be impacting your housing, that will be impacting your transport opportunities, and that will be impacting your education as well. So many people I know who are working 1, 2, 3 or 4 jobs just to make ends meet. No time left at all for children. One of the campaign priorities for the National Labour Party is around Great British Energy, setting up a new national company focusing on renewable energy, 650,000 jobs around the UK. We have a real opportunity here in Norfolk, particularly with offshore wind. The Conservatives have always been quite lukewarm towards offshore wind. It's a huge opportunity to get new jobs in Norfolk, and I think we should be grasping that. I visited Feltwell Church yesterday or the day before. Fantastic example of a community rallying together to support the community. Success for me is when the last food bank closes because it's not needed.
Thank you. Yes, we certainly need a very fast reduction in our energy costs, which are our home and household energy bills, which have escalated recently. Prior to COVID and the Ukraine war and the other global crises, we had organisations like Insulate Britain and Extinction Rebellion campaigning for us all to have better insulated houses and lower bills, and we were encouraged to ridicule them and see them as a problem. But my goodness, we could have done with the results of their campaigns now. So the Liberal Democrats want to set up a 10-year home energy upgrade programme. It's obviously going to be a long term because there are millions of houses in the UK. We have a very poor housing stock compared to other countries in Europe as well. So it's a big job, but again, there's work to be had there, investment, and yes, good, clean, secure jobs in insulation and renewable power. We want to try and get all the UK's electricity supplied by renewable electricity by 2030, or 90% of it supplied. So a big front end change in getting towards net zero, which will also, and you know, renewable energy is cheaper, despite what we're often told. On the subject of child poverty and food banks, we need a national food strategy. That's what the UK is lacking. The trade has been messed up, into trade in food, again with Brexit and borders that have not been resolved, despite the years that you know, it's been the time we've had to try and get these things sorted out since the Brexit vote. The Liberal Democrats will invest £1 billion in the British farming industry to keep our farmers working. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. We need to lift the two-child cap as well. That's very important. I'd also like to see supermarkets linked with food banks, because I think there's a lot of waste that happens in supermarkets. So I think that would be really good to have a local initiative of all the supermarkets in Norfolk. I'd like to see them come together and have food banks outside the properties or in villages and towns. I think that would really work myself, and I think that's just common sense thing to do. Reform, when it comes to energy, it's about scrapping net zero. We produced 1% global emissions, and yet everybody else is producing in China, in America, in India. They're producing... Sorry, just someone saying something there. Oh, yeah. And I believe that we should be producing our own cheaper energy by using our own natural resources, and that's also going to create a lot of jobs for our people. The farming budget would also be increased to 3 million, and it's important that we'd allow all farmers to use all of their available land. And that is the reform.
Okay, thank you. You'll notice that we've been very, very general about topics so far. I've got a very specific question to ask now, and it caught my eye in looking at the pile of them because it comes from a first-time voter. So this is, as an 18-year-old first-time voter, I am less likely than my parents to find stable employment, get on the property ladder, and be able to financially support raising my own family. How would you ensure that young people in southwest Norfolk, like me, have the same economic opportunities as our parents and grandparents?
Absolutely spot-on question, really, and I think the question of our age. How is it possible that we've got our young people, a whole generation of people that are completely locked out of the housing market? It's ridiculous. In the context of half of the council homes that were built in this country having been sold under the right to buy, and half of those now owned by buy-to-let landlords charging on average 3 times the council rent. It's impossible for young people to get onto the housing market unless you've got a fairly liberal bank of mum and dad to help you do so. And I think it's unacceptable. When I was 20, I left home. I moved into what was, in those days, a secure private sector tenancy. They existed in 1980. And I was paying £8 a week rent and rates for my 2-bedroom flat overlooking Greenwich Park, actually not too far from where Liz lives now. And what I wonder is, what prospect is there of our new generation being able to do that? What prospect is there for them to be able to have decent jobs? And what prospect is there for them to be able to live the sorts of lives that we were able to lead, able to start families in our 20s and our 30s instead of having to wait until you're in your 40s before you can actually afford to leave home? We want to see a mass programme of council house building. That's the solution to our housing crisis, to provide cheap rented accommodation en masse available to our young people and to people who are in housing need. That's what's required now. Council tax is subsidising to the tune of hundreds of millions of pounds rent to private landlords for temporary accommodation. It's one of the main reasons why councils are going bankrupt at the moment. We need a proper training policy in this country. We need to abolish student fees so that young people can afford to go to university, and we need quality apprenticeships. That will solve, I think, the problems.
Thank you very much.
Oh, sorry, and equal pay.
Thank you, that's right. Yeah, I think it's a real shame. Young people have been neglected by successive governments. And I have to say, the cynical reason is that they're less likely to vote. So please, young people, if you're listening to this, go out and vote. Your vote does matter. They've been deprived of opportunities. Tuition fees were sneaked in and then increased. The loans are at outrageous rates. I know, I've got a son who started to go to university, and I know the interest rates they charge, they're ludicrous. Apprenticeships are non-existent. The number of applicants for every job now, young people are chasing jobs and not getting even an interview. Hundreds of applications for a single job. Why? What has happened to this country? Where's all this famed wealth? We're the 6th richest country in the world, and yet we can't train our young people? It's a complete disgrace. Nursing bursaries have been removed. There was a time when you could start nursing, get given a monthly stipend, learn on the job, come out with a guaranteed job, a very respectable, well-paying job as a nurse. And you were set. Non-existent. Nurses come out with degrees now, and this government, in its infinite wisdom, doesn't even want to pay nurses a proper pay. They're actually putting in nursing associates who are not proper trained nurses to take nurses' jobs. They bring physicians' associates to take over doctors' jobs because they don't want to pay properly qualified people. Housing is non-existent. Social housing needs to come back. The Green Party would build social housing again so that people actually had a place to call home. We would put in a minimum wage of at least £15 for everyone because inflation is biting really hard, and we need to give people the means to actually pay their bills and live independently. We would bring in rental security so that they weren't a threat of eviction for absolutely no fault of theirs. And training, which was mentioned previously, is so important. I don't believe that degrees are the only way. We need many routes to good employment.
Sorry to put in.
It starts with schools. Why in this part of Norfolk do we have the highest exclusion rates in the county and probably in the country? That's shocking. Schools must begin to cater for children of all talents, whatever they may be, and encourage them not to achieve the best GCSE grades that they can possibly have when they're not that way inclined, but to develop other talents, to encourage them to get into the trade and skills. Tradesmen, you can't get electricians, plumbers, carpenters very easily this day. So what's happened? Why are these young people not being given the training which will get them the jobs? In Norwich, 200 young people were not in employment over the age of between 16 and 30. They undertook a very active, aggressive campaign to get those people into jobs. They gave themselves a target of getting 100 of those 200 into jobs within a year. They achieved it within 7 months by active engagement with companies offering apprenticeships, encouraging them to get apprenticeships. So I believe that if we apply our minds and aggressively to getting these young people back into school, giving them the proper trades, getting them apprenticeships, we can get them back into employment, earn a living, and then hopefully be able to afford the houses that we were all able to get in our early 30s and 40s. Thank you.
If you are on a low wage, it's impossible to get a mortgage. And frankly, even if you're on a reasonable wage, it's difficult to get a mortgage. So the issue of housing is very much linked to jobs and pay. But I think it goes much further than that. One of the first things the Conservative government did when they came in 2010 is slash the national budget for social housing in this country. And as a result, we've seen declining numbers of social and affordable housing being built. And we absolutely must get back to a point where social and affordable housing is part of the mix. I'm very passionate about shared ownership, where you have a mixture of part rent and part mortgage. It's a real good opportunity to get people onto the housing ladder, and I would like to see more of that in this country. The fundamental issue, though, is around supply, and if we're going to make housing more affordable, we've got to increase supply. Personally, I would like to see a community-led planning process, not a developer-led one. I say that because so often in South West Norfolk we see the homes being built that developers want to build, not the homes being built that we need. We desperately need particularly 1- and 2-bedroom properties for small families and for older people that want to downsize. We don't need 4- and 5-bedroom mini mansions on the edges of villages across Norfolk. For too long in this country, developers have ruled the roost. We've got to move back to a situation where we are using homes more sensibly, addressing empty homes, addressing second homes. We've got to use brownfield sites, and we've got to build the homes that we need.
Absolutely. We are short of hundreds of thousands of homes in this country. We need to build, the Liberal Democrats believe we need to build 380,000 per year. That would be over the term of the Parliament. And that would include 150,000 homes which are social housing. Affordable, might need to be redefined, but we need those. Now that sounds like a very worrying prospect for the local environment, but we want those to be in new garden cities. We've had garden cities in the past where an entire community can be established with education, health and jobs to set up a new community, and also community-led new homes in towns and cities where the community wants them in. Often there are areas that can be regenerated. We also want a big investment in industry so that we've got decent jobs for people to take. So with the renewable power industry, we've got the potential for vast investment there. And the UK could become a world leader again, as we were previously with offshore power. So we want those jobs, and of course a significant national house building programme would also bring a massive supply of jobs as well, and all the trades and the supplies that needs. Finally, for the young people, I'd like to thank the person who submitted the question, and as Liberal Democrats we do believe that 16 and 17-year-olds should get the vote as well, because they're very wise to what we need in this country. Thank you.
Hi there. So I worked at YMCA training in Great Yarmouth. That's what I was teaching, and we had a lot of people coming through our books, and they left school with no qualifications whatsoever. So what we did is that we picked them up, and I taught English, functional skills, maths, English, a whole range of other sort of holistic subjects, sports, cooking, etc. And one of the things I was doing is that I was desperately trying to find apprenticeships for many of them. A lot of them went off to Great Yarmouth College, which was fantastic, but a lot of them actually wanted to do much more hands-on vocational activities. But it was so difficult to find apprenticeships that would take them because they had many lower qualifications. So I'd really like to see a massive review of apprenticeships and actually introduce far lower skilled apprenticeships just to get people going and get them started. I think that's really important. Unfortunately, the training centre closed. And so, you know, where did they all go? That's the question. Where did they go? I think they just slipped through the net, unfortunately. As housing is a huge issue, isn't it? It's just a huge issue. I really think they need to think about some innovative housing projects. As one of my colleagues said, we don't need 4- or 5-bedroom massive mansions. We need to look at smaller build homes and affordable homes. What is an affordable home? What is it? Is there a definition of an affordable home? What is it? Is it 100,000? Is it £80,000? I don't know. So I think there needs to be a consideration of what actually is an affordable home. We also want to build on brownfield sites as well and prioritise those.
Thank you.
I think we should build a lot more universities in Scotland. All English students to go to Scotland for free tuition fees.
I'm aware that time is cracking on quite quickly, and we've got summing up from the candidates to come. I do just want to tackle one last subject, and I'm going to suggest that we have a minute to answer, and I know that's really quick for a large subject, and I don't want to keep you fine folk any longer than you need to be sitting on those pews, because my congregation regularly remind me as I'm carrying on that they're not the comfiest things. So, we've had a lot of questions about climate change, biodiversity and environment, which I think, I mean, that's a massive topic, take it where you like, but I think can be summed up in the question, is there a climate emergency? And if there is, how do we deal with it? Sorry, it's a minute.
Thank you. Oh, this is right up my street, as you probably imagine, as a Green Party candidate. Absolutely, there is a climate emergency, and it's all around us. Our weather has become increasingly more erratic. Our food production has gone down. And these things are fairly subtle at the moment because we still have a global kind of trade situation. So when crops fail in one area, we're still able to import just about. Although we did see empty shelves last year because of the difficulties partly with Brexit and the strain that it put. We import the vast majority of our fruit and vegetables. We're not self-sufficient by any means. So we are in quite a precarious position. And to pretend that climate change is not a massive issue facing us would be foolish. It would also be very harmful to our own interests. So yes, absolutely it is. Luckily for us, the solutions are all around us. And the same solutions that would help us with the cost of living, that would help create more green jobs, that would help our young people get into apprenticeships and get into, proper studies. All of these will also help climate change. So
okay,
everything will come together,
so sorry.
And we can be a win-win. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, there is a climate crisis. We need to react with a balanced approach, obviously seeking to achieve a massive reduction in our carbon emissions, but at the same time, carbon emissions, and at the same time, obviously taking steps to defend our own environment, floods, drainage, and so forth. But one thing I have observed as I've walked around these housing estates is not one house has got solar panels on it. I cannot understand why the planners do not require all new houses to have solar panels.
Thank you.
I've been very proud to state on all of my election material and my website that I believe we are facing a climate and biodiversity emergency, and I think it's important that we state that. As a Breckland councillor, I helped write the motion for Breckland Council to declare a climate emergency, and they became the second council in Norfolk to do so. Climate and the environment will inform all of my other policy decisions. It's absolutely integral that that runs through all other policy considerations, whether that's housing or health or transport. The UK has become one of the most nature-depleted countries in the world. Almost half of all bird species and a quarter of our mammal species are at risk of extinction. One of the first things I did as a Labour candidate when I was selected was to sign up to the Climate and Nature Bill. There are some really important proposals in there that can make a big difference, including cutting carbon emissions and reversing the decline in nature. The Labour manifesto includes some really important pledges, including no new coal licences and a ban on fracking, a windfall tax on oil and gas giants, and a ban on bee-killing pesticides. There's a whole range of initiatives that we could be doing. Not all of them are complicated, but we need the political will.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Yes, I absolutely believe we are facing a climate emergency. And if we don't tackle that and address it, however uncomfortable it might be, then everything else we've been talking about tonight becomes irrelevant, because the planet will be uninhabitable, farming will be impacted to such an extent that the crops will fail. It is frightening, but we do have an opportunity. So the environment is built into all parts of the Liberal Democrat manifesto and our plans. I've already talked about we want a big investment in renewable power and home insulation, which will bring down energy bills and create clean, well-paid, secure jobs. We've already have technology here for wind and solar, and yes, I can answer the question about why the planners don't enforce solar panels. It's because we're restricted by government. As a councillor myself, we're not allowed to enforce those rules on.
Thank you very much.
Right, thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, absolutely. We have to protect our environment. We absolutely do for our future generations. It does slightly terrify for my children's future, but I think we need to have another review exactly the impact of natural climate cycles and whether or not we are actually in the climate crisis. I'd like some more information on that, to be honest with you. I'd like to see an increase, and so would reform, about the nuclear power plants as well. That's right, nuclear. And less money spent on renewables, which we are heavily subsidising, which increases our fuel bills.
Okay, thank you.
Every garden, by law, should have their own windmill for renewed energy, and also the ability to grind your own flour and make your own bread.
Seconded. Is there a climate emergency? You've only got to look at the state of some of the farmland in this area to see that we've got a climate emergency. Farmers unable to work the land because they're underwater. So yes, there is a climate emergency. We waste 30% of the food that we produce in this country at the moment. It's ridiculous. And because we are driven by capitalism, because we're driven by profit and the profit motive, there is no incentive and no profit for the energy companies to actually invest in and develop green technologies. Yes, every home should be built to the highest sustainable codes, including solar panels. Why is that not happening? Because David Cameron made a big virtue out of a bonfire of the building regulations, which, by the way, gave us Grenfell Tower. And I think at the end of the day, we have to see solar, wind, tidal energy developed, no nukes, please.
Thank you very much. Oh, that really focuses the mind, doesn't it? I think I might try a 1-minute sermon next Sunday. Handily, we're back where we began, and we're on our closing statements now. So, James, thank you.
2 minutes to save South West Norfolk. This constituency deserves better. The outcome of this election, I'm afraid, is a given. Labour will form the government. Now is the opportunity, though, to vote for a person and not a party. So which of us is most likely to win and will best represent this constituency in Parliament and here in Norfolk? Vote for Liz Truss and you will be rewarding failure at all levels and possibly making a Labour victory here more likely. Vote for Terry and Labour and you'll be getting one more bum on the Labour benches, one bound to follow the party whip, whether or not that be in the constituency's interests. He's a long-standing Labour councillor and one saddled with local party politics. He would struggle, I would say, to do effective business with Conservative councils and therefore influence the decisions which impact on your daily lives. A vote for Toby and reform will make Labour victory here more likely, and notwithstanding their intentions, so too will a vote for others. And we will risk losing a GP in Downham. A vote for me would represent a monumental victory for decency and personal accountability. I have no political ambitions apart from serving the interests of this constituency. Your vote will send shockwaves through Westminster. I will not go unnoticed, and if the experience of others elected as independents is right, I would have influence there, and I have the skill set to do so. Back here in Norfolk, unencumbered by party politics, I can deal in a constructive way with councils and others, and as the local champion will make a real difference to matters which impinge on our daily lives, like young people and education, access to medical and dental services, floods, and yes, potholes. So vote for the person and not a party. Vote independent. Vote bag. Thank you.
Thank you. If you want to see Liz Truss removed as our MP, then vote for me. We have some fantastic candidates in Josie and Pallavi, fantastic local councillors, and despite his last comments, I have an awful lot of respect for James Bagg. But I am the candidate best placed to defeat Liz Truss. Every tactical vote website and every organisation is recommending a vote for me. If you're a Lib Dem or a Green voter, many of your values and priorities are my values and priorities. And whilst we wouldn't agree on everything, we would agree on far more than you and Liz Truss. And make no mistake about it, Liz Truss is a threat to our environment, she is a threat to our freedoms, and as she's already demonstrated, she's a threat to our personal finances. We cannot risk Liz Truss and her views and her rhetoric having greater prominence in a heavily weakened Conservative Party post-election. I am local, I am committed, and I understand South West Norfolk. And for me, constituency first, party second. South West Norfolk is my home. It's where my business is based and it's where my network of friends and family are. After 15 years as a councillor in this constituency, I understand how local government works and I can apply that knowledge as your Member of Parliament. My background speaks for itself, whether it's my commitment to environmental issues, animal welfare, my work to tackle poverty or support for small businesses. In this election, we need to show the rest of the country that we will not be taken for granted by an absent MP who uses us as a platform for other things. We can and must do better, and I hope I can count on your support.
Thank you. I am proud to be representing the Liberal Democrat Party. We have a bold, ambitious manifesto which is fully costed to fix, in particular, save the NHS and fix social care, fix the care crisis. We haven't touched on that this evening. The Liberal Democrats have already, even in opposition as a small party, brought in the Right to Carers Leave Act. Only 5 days per year. Currently, we wanted 10, and hopefully in future we'll be able to increase that to 10 days per year that you're permitted to request from your employer. We want to have increased carers allowance to recognise the work that unpaid carers do. We want to increase the carers minimum wage and also address the current scandal of people who've accidentally overclaimed carers allowance without realising being prosecuted for it. That absolutely needs to be dealt with. We support the Parliamentary Ombudsman's recommendations to compensate women who were born in the 1950s and were affected by the pension scandal. Thank you. Many of you have spoken to me about that on the doorstep, and I've talked to my colleagues at work as well, and it clearly was not communicated even to professionals in the pensions industry. The Ombudsman made a recommendation, but the Conservatives have failed to implement it. We also want to retain the triple lock on the pensions to keep those try and get them up to a reasonable value, particularly compared to other countries in Europe. Yes, I'm very proud of representing the Liberal Democrats and all the policies that I've talked about this evening, and if I was to be elected as your MP, I'd be honoured to take that position and to represent you all to the best of my ability. Thank you.
Firstly, I think it's just quite reassuring that everyone here has said they are going to be here for their constituents. Personally, absolutely, it's vital for me, and this would be my primary job if I were to be elected. So I've always thought to myself, well, I would like people that I can vote for. I want a person that's lived the real world, that understands its struggles, its difficulties, and I believe I'm that person. I've worked as a nursing assistant here in Norfolk, and I've looked after elderly as well with personal care. I've worked in teaching in Great Yarmouth. I've even looked after animals at Red Wings Horse Sanctuary. So right now I work for adult learning, so adult education is my passion. I firmly believe that, and we really need to develop that and get as many people, adults, educated with their skills as possible. That's really, really important. The young people as well, as I said before, is a real passion of mine, especially with the apprenticeships. But essentially, I'm you. So I've lived in the real world. I find it difficult at times. I live independently, raising 2 kids. So it is difficult, and I think I would be a fantastic MP for you. Thank you very much.
I'm after those electors, 60% of this country that do not vote. Why do they not vote? Well, obviously they don't want any of the parties that are there. There should be a box on the bottom of the ballot form, none of the above. Well, I am none of the above.
I live in Kings Lynn, and I'm standing in this election because after 14 years of austerity and having seen the impact of that up close and personal, having spent all of my working life in the public sector, the time has come, I think, for a challenge to the status quo and a challenge to the conventional wisdom that we need to carry on much in the way that we are. The fact is that a civilised society, somebody once said, can be judged by the way it treats its most vulnerable people. And from what I've seen in the last 14 years, Britain has descended into barbarism. You don't know how terrible things are until you need to use those services. And believe me, if any of you end up in need of using services, in need of claiming benefits, you will see just how horrific and just how humiliating the system is. It's broken. It won't get fixed by this government. It won't get fixed, I think, by a Starmer government. It needs a different approach. Only the peoples of England, Scotland and Wales have a true interest in the future of our country, based on democracy, collectivism and mutual support. We need to be united, independent and sovereign, free from the chains of imperialism, and we need to stand up for our communities. Those affected by the bedroom tax, long NHS waiting lists, the Grenfell fire scandal, those who've lost loved ones or whose loved ones suffered under COVID while the government partied, who witnessed the injustice of the post office and infected blood scandals, the P&O workers' sackings. You've now got an opportunity to hand your verdict to this Conservative government's rule. We urge you to vote against the government of greed and incompetence. And our true enemies are not those arriving in boats, but those sitting in Parliament and on business boards, military multinationalists and polluting companies. Those are the enemies of the British people. And so I urge you to vote Communist.
Thank you. Many of you know I'm a GP by profession. I didn't enter party politics initially. I first became aware of the climate and biodiversity crisis and started being an activist in a very non-party political way. I campaigned against the incinerator locally. I've also campaigned to keep a green space at Kings Lynn Parkway. I've campaigned against the development of a quarry in Sholdham. So you can see where my heart is. I'm not just speaking, I live this. This is where my entire life has been. The reason I entered party politics is because I realized that my power was very, very limited. I was banging my head against a brick wall. The people in power were deaf and blind to entreaties of, ordinary people like us who said, we have a crisis here. This is a biodiversity crisis. This is a climate crisis. Do something. And they don't seem to hear it. As I entered party politics, I realized that actually all of the different problems facing us come together, and all of them can be solved by the same solutions. So I have a really clear vision for South West Norfolk. I believe we can do so much better. And I believe that the people of South West Norfolk are actually very green. And I can say this with confidence because I have received so many emails since putting my head up as a candidate, people pleading for compassion in farming, people asking for me to intervene and stop industrial factory farming, to support the NHS. Email after email after email has been about for the public good, about the good of animals, about the good of wildlife around us. This is the sort of area that we are, and I believe that I would be the best person to represent your interests. I've lived here a long time. I'm a counsellor. I speak to a lot of people, both in my day job as a GP and as a counsellor, and I really enjoy it. And I'm struck time and again by how kind and thoughtful people are, very unlike what the press would like us to believe. So please vote with your hearts. Don't be misled by all the electoral calculations. This is a really important election.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So there we have it. You've heard from 7 of your candidates this evening. It strikes me that to stand forward and put yourself forward for public service takes a great deal of courage. So please, would you show your appreciation to our candidates? Thank you.
Thank you.
In a minute. We also need to say thank you to Friends of the Earth who have organised this hustings this evening. So thank you to Friends of the Earth for putting this event together. For Jamie's Light and Sound at the back, thank you so much for keeping us heard and seen as well. And for the folk here in this church community who have set up and served teas and coffees as well as you arrive. Thanks to them. One last thing to say. We're sat in a Methodist church, so I'm going to leave the last words of the evening to one of the founders of Methodism. This is John Wesley, writing in his journal on October the 6th, 1774. And he says this: I met those of our society who had votes in the ensuing election and advised them, 1, to vote without fee or reward for the person they judged most worthy. 2, to speak no evil of the person they voted against. And 3, to take care that their spirits were not sharpened against those that voted on the other side.
Okay, it's not working. Thank you for stepping in at such short notice and for your both skillful and cheerful chairing of the event. Thank you, candidates, for your thoughtful and good-natured and good-humoured replies to all the questions. Thank you to all of you who suggested questions and for being here. It's really heartening to see you all. Thank you to Jamie. Thank you to the wider church community for supporting and hosting this event. I hope I haven't forgotten anyone, but thank you all. Well.